The Casebook of Sherlock Holmes, 1927, Episode 3, The Sussex Vampire. Picture yourself at 221B Baker Street on a foggy November morning in 1896. Watson arrives to find Holmes chuckling over his correspondence, which immediately piques Watson's curiosity. Holmes rarely finds his cases amusing. What is it, Holmes? Some absurd inquiry that's tickled your fancy? Holmes passes Watson a letter. Read this, Watson. Tell me if modern rationality has truly conquered all superstition, or if we're sliding back into medieval darkness. Watson reads aloud. Dear Mr. Holmes, I write to you regarding my wife, whom I believe to be a vampire. On 2 occasions I have witnessed her with her mouth pressed to our infant son's neck, and afterward I have found small wounds and traces of blood on the child. My wife is Peruvian, from a region where ancient superstitions persist. I fear she has brought some dark curse from her homeland. Can you investigate this matter before I am forced to take more drastic action? Robert Ferguson of Ferguson and Muirhead Tea Brokers, Sussex. Can you imagine Watson's reaction? Detective. A successful businessman in 1896 claiming his wife is a vampire. It seems like something from a penny dreadful, not a legitimate case for Sherlock Holmes. Yet the letter writer is clearly educated and prosperous, not the type prone to Gothic fantasies. Holmes, this is obviously the delusion of a jealous or unstable mind, Watson declares. Vampires don't exist. This Mr. Ferguson needs a psychiatrist, not a detective. But Holmes's expression is more serious than Watson expects. I'm not so quick to dismiss it, Watson. Ferguson is a respected businessman, married 15 years ago to a Peruvian lady he met during his travels in South America. They have a baby together, and Ferguson has a teenage son from his first marriage. Something has happened in that household to make a rational man write such a letter. Consider, Holmes continues, that Ferguson doesn't actually believe in vampires. He's grasping for an explanation for behavior that seems inexplicable. He's seen his wife apparently biting their infant son. What rational explanation could there be for such an act? If you eliminate the impossible supernatural explanation, you're left with something equally disturbing, often a mother harming her own child. Perhaps the vampire theory is actually less painful for him to consider. Think about this psychological insight. Sometimes people embrace supernatural explanations because the natural alternatives are too horrible to contemplate. A vampire wife is monstrous but external. A curse, a possession, something that isn't really her fault. But a wife who deliberately harms her infant? That's a horror that destroys everything Ferguson believes about the woman he loves. Holmes decides the case warrants investigation and telegrams Ferguson to expect their visit. They take the train to Sussex, arriving at Ferguson's substantial country house, a prosperous establishment that shows no external signs of Gothic horror. But the atmosphere inside is oppressive. Servants whisper nervously. Ferguson himself looks haggard and desperate, and a palpable tension fills every room. Mr. Holmes, thank God you've come. Ferguson greets them with obvious relief. I'm at my wit's end. I love my wife desperately, but I cannot ignore what I've seen with my own eyes. Twice now, I've witnessed her with her mouth on baby Jack's neck, and afterward the child bears small puncture wounds. What else can this be but vampirism? Holmes examines Ferguson carefully. A solid, practical man in his 50s, clearly suffering genuine anguish rather than delusional hysteria. Tell me everything, Mr. Ferguson. Start from the beginning. When did you first notice this behavior? Ferguson explains. 3 weeks ago, I returned home unexpectedly and went to the nursery. I saw my wife, Dolores, bent over the baby's crib, her face pressed to his neck. When she heard me, she looked up, and I swear, Mr. Holmes, there was blood on her lips. I was horrified, Ferguson continues, but she begged me not to make a scene, said she could explain. But she never did explain, just insisted I trust her, that she would never harm Jack. I wanted to believe her, tried to convince myself I'd misunderstood what I'd seen. Then 1 week ago, it happened again. This time I examined Jack immediately and found 2 small wounds on his neck, freshly made, slightly bleeding. How can she explain that? Watson asks the obvious medical question. May I examine the child? These wounds, are they infected? Does the baby show signs of illness or blood loss? Ferguson leads them to the nursery, where baby Jack sleeps peacefully under the watchful eye of his nurse, a stern woman named Dolores, who regards the visitors with obvious suspicion. Watson examines the baby carefully and finds exactly what Ferguson described: 2 small puncture marks on the neck, recent but healing, no signs of infection. These are genuine wounds, Watson confirms, but surprisingly superficial. If someone was actually biting the child, they were being remarkably careful not to cause serious injury. It's almost as if he trails off, uncertain how to complete the thought. Holmes has been observing the nursery carefully, noting the layout, the windows, the door positions, the nurse's protective attitude toward the baby. Mr. Ferguson, where is your wife now? I'd like to speak with her. Ferguson's face darkens. She's confined to her room. After the second incident, I couldn't risk her being alone with Jack. She's under constant supervision by servants. She weeps constantly, begs to see the baby, but I cannot allow it until I understand what's happening. Can you feel the tragedy building, detective? A husband who loves his wife but cannot trust her. A wife imprisoned in her own home, separated from her child. A household torn apart by suspicion and fear. Whatever the truth, this family is already deeply wounded. Holmes insists on interviewing Dolores Ferguson. Despite her husband's reluctance, they find her in her room, a beautiful woman in her 30s with dark hair and the dignified bearing of South American aristocracy. But her eyes are red from crying, and her hands shake with barely controlled emotion. Mr. Holmes, she says in accented English, my husband thinks I am a monster. He keeps me from my baby. Please, you must help me prove I would never harm Jack. Mrs. Ferguson, Holmes says gently, your husband has seen you twice with your mouth on the baby's neck. Afterward, the child bore wounds. What explanation can you offer? Dolores's face contorts with anguish. I cannot explain. If I tell the truth, it will destroy this family completely. Better Robert think me a monster than know the real horror. Please, Mr. Holmes, you are a clever man. Investigate, discover the truth yourself, but do not make me speak it. I cannot betray. She stops abruptly, having said more than she intended. Holmes notes this carefully. Cannot betray whom, Mrs. Ferguson? Who are you protecting? Because that's what this is about, isn't it? You're not a vampire and you're not insane. You're protecting someone at enormous cost to yourself. Who? Think about what Holmes has deduced. Dolores is protecting someone even though it means being accused of monstrous acts against her own child. What secret could be so terrible that being labeled a vampire is preferable to revealing it, and who in this household would she protect at such cost? Dolores refuses to answer, and Holmes doesn't press her. Instead, he asks to meet Ferguson's other son, Jack Baskerville, the teenage boy from Ferguson's first marriage. Ah, yes, Jack, Ferguson says with obvious affection. He's 15, brilliant student, studying for university entrance. Unfortunately, he had an accident last year, fell from his horse, and injured his spine. He's been in a wheelchair ever since, but his mind is sharp as ever. He adores his little half-brother. They find young Jack in his room, a bookish teenager with his father's features, and an air of premature maturity that comes from suffering. His wheelchair is positioned near the window, and Holmes notices something significant. From this position, Jack has a clear view of the nursery window across the courtyard. "Young Mr. Ferguson," Holmes greets him. "I understand you're quite devoted to your baby brother." "Little Jack is wonderful," the boy responds with genuine warmth. "I read to him sometimes, though he's too young to understand. Father says when I go to university I'll miss him terribly. I suppose I will." His tone is wistful, perhaps tinged with something else. Resentment? Jealousy? Holmes cannot quite identify the emotion. Holmes examines the room carefully, noting the extensive collection of books on chemistry and natural sciences. "You're interested in science?" The boy brightens. "Yes, I'm particularly fascinated by toxicology and pharmacology. Father thinks I should study medicine, but I'm more interested in research than practice. There are so many poisonous substances in nature: venoms, plant alkaloids, fungal toxins. It's remarkable how tiny amounts can have such profound effects." "Can you see the red flag here, detective?" A boy confined to a wheelchair, fascinated with poisons, positioned where he can observe the nursery. Holmes certainly notices, though he shows no sign of his suspicions to the teenager. As they leave Jack's room, Holmes asks Ferguson, "Your son's accident? Tell me more about when it occurred." Ferguson's face clouds. "Terrible tragedy. Jack was an excellent horseman, but his mount was startled by something, we never determined what, and threw him badly. He landed on rocks, damaging his spine. The doctors say he'll never walk again. It's broken his mother's heart. My first wife died years ago, but Jack keeps her portrait in his room and speaks of her constantly." "When exactly did this accident occur?" Holmes presses. Ferguson thinks about 8 months ago, just a few weeks before little Jack was born. "Why do you ask?" But Holmes waves the question away. "Just gathering facts, Mr. Ferguson. Now I'd like to examine your son's room more carefully, if you don't mind, particularly his chemistry books and any specimens he might keep." Back in Jack's room, with the boy sent downstairs for tea, Holmes conducts a thorough search. In a locked drawer, picked easily by Holmes's skilled fingers, he finds a collection of items that tell a damning story: a small blowgun made from a hollow tube, several darts with tips stained dark, and a vial labeled curare, extreme caution. Watson recognizes the poison. "Curare! That's a South American arrow poison, isn't it? Causes paralysis of the muscles, can be fatal in sufficient doses." Holmes nods grimly. "And in very small doses, it causes temporary weakness, numbness." Now, Watson, consider curare-tipped darts shot from a blowgun aimed at a baby in a nursery visible from this window. What would result? Watson's face shows dawning horror. The baby would cry out in pain from the dart prick. The mother, hearing her child's distress, would rush to the nursery. She'd find the tiny dart wound, extract the dart, and he stops, understanding flooding through him. She'd suck out the poison. That's what Ferguson saw. Not vampirism, but a mother desperately trying to save her poisoned child. Think about this revelation, detective. Dolores wasn't harming her baby. She was saving him. She found darts in his neck, recognized curare poisoning, being from South America, where such poisons are known, and did the only thing she could: sucked out the venom before it could spread. It's an act of maternal heroism that her husband mistook for monstrous attack. But why? Watson asks. Why would Jack, the teenager, be shooting poisoned darts at his baby brother? Holmes's expression is sad. Jealousy, Watson, the classic story of the displaced child. Jack was his father's only son for 15 years. the center of attention, especially after his mother died. Then Ferguson remarries, and a new baby arrives, a healthy baby who can walk, who will inherit the father's love and eventually the business. Jack became the crippled older son pushed aside. The timing supports this, Holmes continues. Jack's riding accident occurred just before the baby's birth. I suspect it was no accident, possibly a suicide attempt that failed, leaving him paralyzed but alive. That would explain his interest in poisons afterward, perhaps contemplating another attempt. Instead, his resentment turned toward the baby. If little Jack died, Big Jack would be the only son again. Watson is appalled. A 15-year-old boy attempting to murder his infant half-brother. It's monstrous, but Holmes shakes his head. It's human, Watson. Tragic, twisted, deeply wrong, but human. The boy is suffering, feels replaced and forgotten, trapped in a wheelchair while a healthy baby receives all the attention he once had. I'm not excusing his actions, but I understand them. They confront young Jack with the evidence, the blow gun, the darts, the curare. His face crumbles and suddenly he's not a poisoner, but a frightened child. I didn't mean to kill him, just make him sick, so father would pay attention to me again, but the doses were so small I thought it wouldn't really hurt. When I saw Mother Dolores sucking the poison out, I realized. He breaks down completely. You realized she knew, Holmes finishes. She understood what you were doing, but chose to protect you rather than expose you. She saved the baby twice from your poison darts, then endured being accused of vampirism rather than reveal that her husband's beloved son was a would-be murderer. Mrs. Ferguson sacrificed her own reputation to protect you, young man. That's the measure of her character. Can you imagine the complexity of Dolores's position? She married into a family with a troubled teenage stepson. She bore a child who became the target of that stepson's jealous rage, and when she discovered the truth, she faced an impossible choice: expose Jack and destroy her husband's relationship with his only remaining link to his first wife, or protect Jack and accept being labeled a monster herself. She chose the latter. Ferguson is brought in and told everything. His reaction is complex: horror at his son's actions, shame at having suspected his wife, gratitude for her sacrifice, and profound grief that his family has been so damaged. What do I do? He asks Holmes. Jack needs help, not punishment, but he tried to murder his own brother. Holmes's advice is carefully measured. Jack needs psychiatric treatment and close supervision. The curare and blowgun must be destroyed. He must never be left alone with the baby, but prosecution would serve no purpose. The boy is clearly disturbed, not evil. With proper help, he may recover. The greater challenge is repairing your marriage and helping your wife forgive both you for doubting her and Jack for putting her in such an impossible position. Think about this resolution, detective. It's not clean or simple. A would-be murderer receives treatment instead of punishment. A mother who sacrificed everything must now forgive both the husband who doubted her and the stepson who tried to kill her child. There's no neat courtroom scene, no villain led away in chains, just a damaged family trying to heal. Watson asks Holmes privately, should Jack face prosecution? He attempted murder, even if he's only 15. Holmes's response reveals his understanding of human complexity. Watson, the boy, is wheelchair-bound, psychologically traumatized by his accident, grieving his dead mother, and feeling replaced by a new baby. He's not a criminal mastermind. He's a disturbed child who needs help. Prison would destroy him, completely without making anyone safer. Sometimes mercy serves justice better than punishment. The case concludes with the Ferguson family beginning the long process of healing. Dolores is vindicated and reunited with her baby. Young Jack enters psychiatric treatment with a specialist in Vienna who deals with such cases. Ferguson dedicates himself to repairing his marriage and ensuring both his sons receive the attention they need. It's not a happy ending, but it's a hopeful beginning. Holmes reflects on the case during the train ride back to London. Watson, people asked me to investigate vampirism, and I found something far more mundane but far more tragic. A family torn apart by jealousy, misunderstanding, and secrets. No supernatural monsters, just humans making terrible choices for understandable reasons, which is more frightening. Vampires or the everyday evil that ordinary people are capable of? The lesson, Holmes continues, is that when you're tempted to believe in supernatural explanations, look for the human motivations underneath. Vampirism is impossible, but maternal sacrifice, teenage jealousy, and poisoned darts are all too real. The fantastic often disguises the ordinary. So tell me, detective, did you suspect the truth before Holmes revealed it? Did you consider that what appeared to be attack might actually be rescue? This case teaches us that context is everything. The same action, a mother's mouth on a baby's neck, can be interpreted as monstrous or heroic, depending on what we understand about the circumstances. The case also raises difficult questions about justice and family loyalty. Was Dolores right to protect Jack at such cost to herself? Should Ferguson have trusted his wife despite the damning evidence? Should Jack face criminal prosecution despite his youth and psychological damage? There are no simple answers, only the messy complexity of real human situations. Years later, Watson learns that the Ferguson family largely recovered. Jack's treatment in Vienna helped him process his resentment and grief. He never fully reconciled with his stepmother, but reached a civil detente. He eventually studied pharmacy, channeling his interest in poisons into legitimate medical applications. The irony is not lost on anyone.